Hi guys, I'm Archie. I'm the design director, and I'm going to talk a little bit about like Figma and stuff. So it'll probably be like a pretty chill day. And also, please like answer my questions when I speak, because last time no one talked and it was like really awkward. So please talk. So yeah. Okay. Let's just start off. I don't want to take up too much of your time. One of the most important things when like you're making a design for something, like when you're just getting started, is the references. And I feel like people don't talk about this enough in design. They'll just like go straight into it, or they'll find a picture on Pinterest and like recreate it, which obviously both of those are not good ideas. So I want to talk a little bit about how we collect references and how we like take inspiration for them. So there's obviously a bunch of different websites you can use, like Pinterest, Dribble, all that stuff. But let's just say for the sake of time, let's say we were making a food website and we already found these examples over here, and let's say we really like them. So when we have all of these references, we want to like pick out things that are similar between them or things that we like in them. So like if you see these, maybe we can look at the colors, the type of fonts, illustrations. What kind of things do you guys see that are like similar?
It shows the food.
Yeah, shows the food. If you notice, these are like, sorry, I just cut someone off. Go ahead, Trevor.
Oh, I was gonna say there's also a lot of like yellow, orange, and like red,
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
bright
definitely.
colors.
So
hmm
warm colors, and if you see the food, it's not illustrations, it's pictures of actual food, and it's like on the background, if that makes sense. So it feels like it's like on the screen. And what about the fonts? If you notice, do they look like serif or sans serif fonts? I can zoom in.
Sans serif?
Yeah, sans
Yeah,
serif.
sans serif's the one without the like little
Yes, sans serif
edges on
is
it.
the one without the little thingy. So we noticed that if we're making food-centered content, these are some trends that we could have. So in general, if we were to be making something like this, we would be doing similar things. We'd probably be using sans serif, warm colors, and illustrations similar to this. So yeah, that's just how you would use references in the future. Don't just go to Pinterest and like copy it. Make sure you notice what exactly is similar and what you like about each. Okay, that was just like a quick side note, but today what we're really going to do is I'm going to show you how we recreate this like prototype on Figma. And this is like kind of based on what we did for Day of Code. It's not exactly like it. I know Regina knows we did something different, but I'm going to show you how we build this. And from this, we're going to learn about how Figma works, basically. But before we can get to that, we always start with two things. The first thing is a sketch. So if you see this sketch here, it isn't great, but that's okay. That's what a sketch is. So when you start doing a design for a learning lab or like any project you're working on, either you'll start with the sketch that you draw or someone else will give you a sketch. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to pretend that someone gave us a sketch because someone did. Matt sent me this like 3 months ago when we were working on this actual thing. So we're going to work from the sketch over here. And that's the first thing we need. The second thing we need is a style guide. So anyone know what a style guide is? Can anyone tell me?
It's like a set of fonts and colors that you're like trying to use
Yeah,
predominantly or exclusively on the website.
yeah, exactly. So it's just a set of, well, in our case, we're just going to do fonts and colors. But also, if we look at the ACM style guide, they have a whole bunch of different things that are not loading right now. But yeah, they have all of these different design rules, the stuff. Ours, obviously, we do not need to go into this much detail for just a learning lab, but this is what a design or style guide is. It outlines all the different fonts and the colors we'll use. So in this case, I already made one for you guys. I'm not gonna go through that torture, but over here, if you notice, all of these fonts are in Poppins, which is the like ACM font. So if you want something to seem ACM-y, you should use Poppins. It says this all in the ACM design guide, or like right over here. So you don't need to remember this, but yeah, this should be open sans, but let me actually fix that right now. Okay. So we have these fonts, title, subtitle, and body text. We also have these colors. We have white, like a dark gray, and we have this Teach LA green color. So what I want to show you is this is great and all, But when we have a style guide, a lot of times we want to create something called like a color style. A color style basically is something that, let's say I want to make another thing. Maybe I want to make, I don't know, a star. Somewhere on my website is a star, and I want to have it the color, this dark color. So I can create this color style and I can change it. Let's say I'm not liking this and I kind of want to make it a little darker, a little lighter or something. What I would do is, why isn't this working? Yeah, so I can edit this style directly. Maybe I want it a little lighter, and then all of it would become lighter. So this is really useful because when you're making a prototype in Figma and you're using the same color everywhere, if you change it once on your style guide, you want to be able to change it everywhere. So that's why color styles are useful. So it's kind of the same idea for textiles. Over here, did I already make a textile? Okay, maybe I didn't. That's okay. I'll show you how we do that. It's the same idea for textiles. So for color styles, the way we do that is we select whatever it is. We go over here to the right-hand side, the design tab. We click these 4 dots over here, and then we add a color. So I'll call it Teach LA Green. All right, cool. And the same thing for text. We just select whatever text, click the 4 dots, add, and I'll click title. Great. So now we have these styles that we can use in the future. And let's get started now with our actual design. So the first thing we always do is we make something called a frame. A frame, you can think of it as like a screen that we're going to design on. So we go up here, the top left, we click frame. And usually you're going to be designing for desktop. So I will just click desktop over here and it will bring up our screen. Okay, I'm going to name it something by just double clicking. I'll just call it name screen. All right, so now what we have our sketch, we have our style guide, we have to start designing. So let's look at the sketch. Any ideas for what maybe I should do first? There's no right answer, but give me something.
Navbar?
Navbar.
Navbar. Let's do it. Okay, cool. So navbar usually probably will be a rectangle. So to make a rectangle, I'll go up to the top. This is the shape tool, and I'll just click rectangle. And then I can just draw a rectangle like I normally would. Okay, cool. So for some reason, this rectangle did not go inside my frame, but I'm just going to drag it in. A frame is like a special type of group. So let's say, yeah, we're recreating this, so it should be white. The way we make it white, we just click on it. We go to the design tab, which we're already on. We can click the fill and we can make it white. And I also gave it an outline. The way we give it an outline is we do stroke, and the same way we can just click the color we want. Okay, I'm going to move it up so we don't see the edges. All right, great. So let's see what this looks like. The way we do that is we do this little present thing, and on the side, it'll open up in a new tab. And this is not the one we want. Give me a sec.
Flashbacks.
Yes, upper buffet. Okay. What I was just doing now, I was pressing Z until it looks like this, and I press Control period / to get rid of the Figma UI. But basically, wait, why isn't it showing the? Give me a sec. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. It might be because it's not connected to the prototype, so I'm just gonna connect it to the prototype. Sorry for the delay, guys. I didn't know this was gonna be an issue. Okay, there you go. So now we can see that over here we have our demo. So it looks like the nav bar is a little too big. We probably don't want it that big. So I'll make it a little smaller. And we can just go over to this tab and see what it looks like. That looks okay to me. All right, so now we want our title. Now we already have our title over here. So what we can do is I can just hold it and I can press Alt while I'm holding it, and that will make a copy of it. So I'm going to bring my title over here. I'm going to move it to the right spot. I'm just going to double click to type what I want. Day of code showcase. Okay, cool. So now let's add in our subtitles. We also have our subtitles over here, that style. So I'll do the same thing. I'll just Alt, and then I'll bring it over here. Okay, so we have event details, about us, project showcase. I'm just going to copy this, but for the sake of time, but that's how you would do it. Okay. So if you notice, I made these a single group. So let's just ungroup and go back and do it. So let's say we put in event details, about us, project showcase. So if you notice, these are a little bit wonky. So how we can fix that is we can go over here. We have these two tools that can help us. The X and Y can definitely help us, and this. So I can do tidy up, and that will make it like distribute itself properly, but they're still not vertically aligned. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to give it the same Y value. So it's, well, the same. Okay. Yeah. So now over here, we have our nav bar right up here. Now, if you notice, these things are staying on the screen because there's this, let me see, I'm going to bring them all over here. Okay, cool. So this is what it would normally look like. It just scrolls on the screen, but let's say usually a nav bar, you want it to stay at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this. The way you select multiple layers is you just click the first one and you can shift to select all of them. And then I'm going to Control G to make it a group. So this makes it a group. I'm going to name it nav. And let's say we want this to always stay at the top. If you go to design and go over here, there's this checkbox called fixed position when scrolling. Okay, so now you can't really see it because there's nothing here, but when I'm scrolling, it always stays there. Okay, now let's see what the next part we should add is. Let's go back to our sketch. Someone tell me, what should I do next?
Text about building own website.
Text about building on a website, indeed. So again, in our style guide, we already have what the text looks like. All I'm going to do is select it, and I'm going to just Alt and drag it over here. So it's the exact same thing. Okay. I'm going to move it down a little. You just move things using the arrow keys. That's the way I'm doing it. And then I'm going to put it over here. We can see what this looks like over here. If I scroll, you can see it disappears, but the nav bar stays there. That's pretty cool. That's pretty much all we have to do for that. All right, what's next? Someone tell me.
The buttons under the text about building our own website, like site one.
Yes,
And
thank you.
site.
So if you notice over here, what I decided is I would put all the buttons next to each other because Math Sketch was a little bit wonky. So we're going to do that. We're going to put all the buttons next to each other. We have a site drop down where we select which site we want to look at. We have this button that will like link us to the real site. And then we have this, which to be honest, I don't really know what it is, but that's fine. We're designers. That's not really our problem. So let's do the drop down first. Now this looks pretty tricky to implement, or it's not that tricky, but what's easier is that we have templates in Figma. The best thing about Figma is that it has a really big community platform, or a semi-big community platform, and you can have all these templates. So this is a template someone made for drop downs. I'm just going to duplicate it over here. I'm going to find which drop down I want as it loads. All I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on clicking until I find it. Maybe I want this one. I'm going to copy it, and then I will bring it into my file. Okay. All I have to do is copy and paste the same way it would work for any other website. Now, this is all great, but this isn't really matching our color scheme. So all we have to do is we'll go into design. And over here, they have these styles already that we don't want them. They're their styles. So we'll just click that button that detaches them. All that does, it like unmakes a color style, so we don't have to deal with it. And now we can change all these colors. So white is probably fine. This gray can probably become a green. This could maybe also become a green. And then we can double click until we get to our label. We know we don't want it to be this font. We want it to be Open Sans, and we can change it to whatever we want. So I think ours was select a website. Okay, great. So now we have our dropdown. Now we just have to add our other buttons. You would do this the same way you do it normally. You would just add a rectangle. You would set the color and the fill, and then you would put your text in and maybe make it a group. But I want to show you one thing over here, which is border or corner radius, or in CSS, it'd be border radius. Basically, all this does is it makes it curved. So if you want a curved button like this, you'd go really high. If you just want it a little bit, it'd be like this. Usually a good number if you want it just really tiny bit curved is maybe like 3 or 4. So I'll do 3, but yeah, actually that looks fine. So I'll make it the color that we want. Green over here. And then I will use our subtitle over here to make it an actual text. So this button over here said view full site, and we also want a link to slides. Okay, so what I want to show you now is something called a, let's see how much time I have. Okay, I'm good. Actually, I will get to that one a little later. So we have our full site. For the sake of time, I'm actually just going to copy in these, but that's how you would make those buttons. Okay, there. If you drag in Figma, you can see these little red lines will like help you out to space things. So I'm just going to do that. Okay. Great. So last thing I want to do is, let's say I want these to be centered. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the buttons. The way I do that is I just drag a box around everything. Now I'll do Control G. And to move it to the middle, we have this special tool that moves it to the middle. Okay, great. Now the last thing is this fancy, complicated looking computer thing. But what we just learned is that we have templates in Figma. We don't need to do all of this. So there is totally a MacBook template that we can use. And we would do the same thing. You would duplicate it, select it, and copy it. But for now, I'm just going to put this one that I already copied into here. Okay. Now, see how the MacBook is kind of falling off the edge of my screen, which isn't great. So if I want to make my screen bigger, all I have to do is select it, and then I will just extend it. Great. So now if we take a look at our website prototype, this is what it looks like, which is pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do is, let's say that we have this other page over here. This one is going to be like where it says project showcase. We want it to link to every single one of the projects. So I'm just going to make a copy of this frame that we already have. Okay, we want to leave the nav bar because that's the same, but I will delete these 3. And let's go ahead and make a super simple, what is it? These little project tabs. So let's just move one over here so we can copy it. All I have to do is I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm probably going to make it white like I did before. And now you obviously can't see it. So what we want to do is we want to add a drop shadow. The way you add drop shadows is in effects over here. You can click it to adjust it. I'm going to probably make it only a little bit so it's not that big of a drop shadow. Okay, cool. So we have this little box over here. Now let's just copy these that you would add in the same way you would add anything else. Okay, this box needs to be a little bigger. Okay, so now we have our new project tab that we made. I'm going to group it. And now what we could do is we could make a whole bunch of copies of this, just Control-C-V it a whole bunch of times. But that's not the best idea, because what if we want to change one thing? Then we have to change it for every single thing. So that's where something called Figma Components come in. Components are basically exactly like components in React. They're just like reusable things that you can change once and it will change all the time. So the way you do that is you just right click on it and you do create component. And now when you make a copy of this, if you see over here, this that we're selected is group 31. It has this like open diamond and the parent one has this closed diamond. That means if I ever change anything on the parent, like let's say I want this picture to be smaller, then it'll get smaller on all of them, which is really useful. So that's how you do a component in Figma, and it's really great. Let's say you want to change one of the child ones, but you want to leave the other ones same. What you would have to do is you would have to say, okay, this is no longer a component anymore. It's just going to be a regular thing. So you're going to right click and do detach instance. Now I can change this one and nothing's going to happen to the parent. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back and fix everything. So now what we can do is we can just make a whole bunch of copies of it, and I'm just going to move in the ones that we already have. Okay, and I'll uncopy and make another row. All right, so now if we go to our screen, why is this one not in here? Okay, we're done with these. I'm just going to delete them. I'll show you how we get to the prototype in just a second, but before I want to show you how we actually make the prototype and make it like a working website, kind of. So I'm going to go into the prototype tab now. And let's say that we have this item over here, or actually this item over here. So this, whenever we click this, it should go to this page. So we can actually do that pretty easily. I'm just going to hover over and have this plus icon. I'm going to drag it over to the page we want it, which is pretty cool. So it does that automatically for you, has on click, navigate to whatever page you're on. Now let's do that one more time. Maybe when we click our title thing over here, we want to go back to the home page. So all I'm doing is I'm selecting it, I'm going into this prototype tab, and then I'm dragging the arrow over here. All right, so if we go over to our prototype, which we now should be able to see. Okay. What is up with this? Okay. Oh, great. Now we can see it. So we have our prototype. If I go and click this, it will go back to home. If I click this, it will do this page right here. So this is a really good tool to have like interactive prototypes so you can maybe show clients or like other people on your team to show what it's like without actually coding it. So this is how you would do a Figma prototype. There's also a whole bunch of other things you can do, like opening like a overlay or like scrolling to a place, but mainly the most important part is just being able to do this, like going to different pages, which is why that's all we're covering today. Okay, let me see what else we were doing. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about today is, let's say that we have all this, we have our whole design, it's great, but now we're starting to code. So how do we actually get this to become a piece of code? So a really important thing I want to talk about is, we'll see all these red lines over here. Anyone want to guess, why would I draw all these on top of my design? What's the point of that?
So you can see like where each like individual like box or like component of your website is.
Yeah, exactly. So if this was an actual HTML website, well, it is now, but when I made this, it wasn't. I would have all of these different components. I'd have this like top text thing, this info bar, all these buttons over here, the select drop down. All of these are different like HTML pieces of my website. So it's really important to know how all of these are laid out, because let's start from the beginning over here. I'm going to annotate on my, I can't annotate. Okay, that's fine. So if we see over here, there's two main sections. There's this section over here on the left side or the main screen. And then we have this stack section on the right side. So that's the main breakdown. We have two screens. Now in this screen over here, we also have another breakdown. We have this top bar over here. And then we have this whole bottom section that has padding around it or margin around it. All right, and now in this bottom section, we have another top section with the C and the assembly code, and then we have the toolbar. And inside the assembly code, we have the top green part and the actual code. Inside the toolbar, we have the actual button. So I could keep going on this for any website, but it's really, really important. And this is like the one thing I really want to stress is like, when you're going from a design to code, don't just jump into it. You really have to think about how all of these grids and like flex boxes are set up before you actually start coding. So this is if you get one thing from this entire workshop, I would really suggest that you do this with your designs before you start coding them. Okay, let's see. I want to talk about a couple things, just like some CSS tricks that will make your life easier. So over here, I have this demo over here. It's pretty simple. I'm pretty sure that all of you could code this up in HTML, just a H1, H2, and a paragraph tag. Let's take a look at that code for a sec. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple things over here. So first is this font size calc thing. So what does that do? If I go to the inspect tab and I change whatever the width of the screen is, if you see the font size changes fluidly along with it. So this is a really important part of responsive design, is when you make fonts that fit properly on each side of the screen. So the way I did that over here, instead of just saying, okay, we want our header 1 to be 12 pixels, what I did is I'm going to calculate it based on whatever the view width is. So this 12 pixels is like the bare minimum. It always has to be that. But then if the screen gets bigger, we make it a little bigger to compensate for that. And I do it for all of these. I do it for H. Why is that 2H? That should be an H2. We have an H1, H2, and a paragraph. This calc trick is really good for making fluid design. So that's one trick for having designs that make sense on both desktop and mobile, which is a really important part of when you're designing a website. Another thing we have is a media selector over here. A media selector basically says, okay, well, if it's this certain condition, that's the only time we're going to apply these styles. So in this case, what we have is this is saying, whenever the screen is less than 600 pixels, we're going to make the color blue. So if you, what happened? So if you see this now, if I make it small, it's blue. But if I make it big, that's not blue. So when could this be useful, do you think? When would we have something happen only on small screens or only on large screens, or why would we need to do this?
Cross-platform for like phones and desktops.
Definitely, yeah. So let's take a look at this again. So let's say we have this like nav bar horizontally over here. Would we want to look at this like squished down on a phone super tiny horizontally?
No, you'd probably want it laid out in a column instead,
Right, you'd probably want it laid out in a column, maybe a hamburger menu that pops out. Those are all details you'll have to think about when you're designing. Like, you obviously would not just have this, you would also have to think about, well, what would this website look on a phone? What would it look like on an iPad? Who knows? But this is one example, a nav bar. When you want something to happen on large screens, but not on small screens, you would use something like a media selector to make sure it only happens on some screen sizes. Okay, and the last thing that's like really important, but I don't have time to fully go into it, is semantic HTML. So we want our HTML to like reflect what the page actually looks like. So I always say, if you have a website and I was like a hacker and I deleted all of your CSS code, I don't know why a hacker would want to do that. That's kind of funny. But let's say I was a hacker who deleted all of your CSS code. Your website should still make sense when I visit it. It won't be pretty anymore, but it should make sense. So for example, over here, let's say I wanted this break over here between my subtitles and my paragraph. Now I could do this. I could just add a bunch of breaks, and you know what, that would work. So I'm gonna comment this out. I'm just gonna add a bunch of breaks. Now this works, it looks fine. It has a break in between, but this isn't great because, well, one, it doesn't actually reflect what's going on in your screen. There's no reason to have a bunch of like breaks here. But also if people are using it on a screen reader, you're gonna have an issue where it's gonna read like break, 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 or it's gonna have a bunch of pauses. So we don't want that. We want our websites to be as accessible as possible. So can anyone think of a better way? I kind of gave it away, but a better way to add this like blank space here between the subtitle and my paragraph?
You add like a div there that's just empty, that just takes up space by any chance? Or
I could, but an empty div is pretty much as meaningless as a bunch of breaks.
Right, and it would cause the same screen reader problem, right?
Right. So what we want to do is whenever we want to change how something looks, we never add HTML. We don't ever do things to HTML just to change how things look. HTML should represent what our page actually is. What we would do here is we would just add a margin to the bottom of the subtitle. So, I mean, you can add a margin to the top of the paragraph too, would do the same thing. But that's what I did here. I just selected the subtitle with my ID subtitle, and then I added a margin to the bottom. So I'll save this. I'll actually make it a little bit bigger. And then you can see this does the same thing. But on a screen reader, it won't have an issue where it like pauses for an unreasonably long time because I put a bunch of breaks there. We don't ever want to do that. So this can come in handy in a lot of different circumstances. I'm just giving one example with all the breaks over here. But for example, if you have a nav bar, you shouldn't make it as a bunch of divs. You should use the nav tag that the HTML specifically made for us to use for nav bars. Also, for a button or a link, you shouldn't make it a div. You should make it a button or a link. Whatever it is, it should be in HTML. So I know sometimes it's like easier to like, oh, I'm going to use an H3 here because it's smaller, but is it actually an H3? That's what we should be thinking about when we're writing our HTML. And we can change whatever it looks like in our CSS. That's what CSS is for, changing what it looks like. But HTML should represent the structure of your page. So that's one really big thing. Wait, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry.
Sorry.
Are you meaning to show like a text editor right now? Because right now I only see the
Gosh,
browser.
I'm so sorry. Let me share my text editor.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Okay, basically,
Yeah, it's all good.
I mean, it's not super complicated. It's just an H1, H2, breaks over here, paragraph. But basically what I did before is I had a whole bunch of breaks over here and now I changed that and I just added a margin to the subtitle. Yeah, this is the same thing that I was talking about before. I'm so sorry for not sharing it. My bad. But this is the calc where 12 pixels is the minimum that we want, but we add on as the screen gets bigger. And this is our media selector, where it just says, okay, when the screen is smaller than 600 pixels, it's gonna get like good. Did I miss anything here that like is confusing? No, does this look good?
I think the main thing that was confusing was I didn't know what you meant when you said media, but I can see it now. Okay. All good.
I'm very sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay.
My bad. But yeah, this is a media selector. It just makes something happen when it's only a certain screen size. Yeah. So honestly, I usually forget the syntax of this and I just Google it and that's totally fine. But this is what a media selector looks like. Okay, cool. So before we leave, just a really couple small things on accessibility. I'm going to share the correct screen now. Okay, great. So we have this website over here called WebAIM, and this will help you check whether your colors are accessible. So you can pick a foreground and a background color. In this case, it looks like this, and it will tell you if you pass or not. So let's say we have our foreground is, I don't know, black, and we want a red background. Now, this passes, but let's say we want it a little darker red. That's not good. So even though we think, okay, well, I could read this, it's fine, I could see what it says, it's not very clear. So this is a really good tool to use when we're figuring out if something is accessible. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna go back to this. Yeah, just a couple extra rules about accessibility. We want to make sure our lines aren't super squeezed together. They should be like not squeezed together. That's all I have to say. Also, we should really be careful when we're using like pixels and absolute positioning in CSS. If you ever try to use pixels or absolute positioning, I want you to stop and like think, should this actually be absolute position? Should this actually be in pixels? Or should it be maybe in view width so it can be responsive to whatever the size of the screen is? The reason for that is when someone zooms into your screen or just uses a screen that's a different size, then your website will look totally different if you use pixels. But if you use view width or view height, that is like dependent on how wide or tall your screen is, then your design will like scale up and scale down properly. Okay, another one is you should use alt text for images. That's pretty self-explanatory because screen readers and things like that. We talked about how HTML should represent the structure of your page. Be careful with autoplay animations and videos. I know it's like a trend in web design now to have a whole bunch of animations and stuff, but in general, it's better to like tone down on that because they can like cause issues for people. And also just give your designs breathing room, like don't squish everything together. But yeah, I think that was the main stuff I wanted to cover today. Was there like any questions? I'm sorry for not sharing screen properly with the code editor, but any questions about like Figma tools and like how to do stuff in Figma at all?
Oh, real quickly on Figma, how did you like get the red outline on the component on like the different rectangles or whatever?
Yeah, I just did that by hand. It's just a bunch of rectangles drawn in.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you don't
Set the
have to
border to, like-
actually.
Oh, I was just saying you like set the border to red on like everything.
Oh yeah, you could definitely do that, except like some of this is just like text, so it wouldn't do that properly. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to do it like this in depth. Like I just did this for demonstration purposes. But usually what I would do is I would just like draw a quick sketch of all these different like boxes, and that would help me out. You don't have to make it this like perfect. Yeah. I
Wait.
feel like this is probably the most confusing part. Any questions on the Figma?
Wait, sorry, where's the border? I see like stroke, colors, effects.
Border is the same thing as stroke.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So if I draw a square over here and I want to add a border to it, I'll just do stroke and then I can make it not that big. Oh my God. Okay. That's reasonably big. So yeah, border is the same thing as stroke.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions about how Figma works? Regina, do you have anything I did not cover?
I think that looks good to me.
Okay, cool. Last thing, I just like really quickly, there is an inspect tab where like if you click on something like text, for example, it will tell you all of these things about it. But really, this is the only one, and maybe this one that's helpful. You shouldn't use these size and line heights for the most part, because like I said, we want our font sizes to be responsive to however big our screen is. But it will basically tell you, okay, this is the font, this is the weight, and maybe you can use the style. But yeah, do not ever use this. If I see you ever put all of this into your HTML, I will come and I will be that hacker who deletes all of your CSS code. I don't want to see any of this. So you would just probably do this with like a div that's a card. Inside this card div, you would have an image, maybe your header and your text. No absolute positioning for this, but yeah. So be careful of the inspect tab, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Any other questions about Figma at all that I can answer?
Thank you.
No. Okay, cool. I think we're good then. Yeah.